Hi, this is Congressman Fred Keller. Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody for joining today's telephone town hall meeting. Over the next hour, we look forward to answering your questions and providing the latest updates about our efforts to combat the coronavirus outbreak and resources that can help mitigate financial impacts you may be experiencing as an individual, family, or small business. I'd like to give a special thanks to House Republican Whip Steve Scalise for joining us to offer his thoughts on our COVID-19 response. Congressman Scalise is a strong, consistent voice for conservative policies and ensuring that Americans have what they need to weather the COVID-19 pandemic. I am thankful for his advice and mentorship during my first months in Congress and can attest that his leadership has been instrumental in fighting for policies that truly benefit all Americans. Congressman Scalise has represented the 1st Congressional District of Louisiana since 2008. He was elected to Congress after serving in Louisiana State Legislature for 12 years. Congressman Scalise is a leader on many issues that matter to the people of Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District, including agriculture, energy development, supporting our veterans, fiscal discipline, and lower taxes. With Scalise, it's an honor to have you join us on today's call. And would you please share some thoughts with the people of Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District? The floor is yours.
Well, Fred, thanks for having me, and really appreciate the people of Pennsylvania's 12th District for sending Fred up to Congress. He's come in at a fairly interesting time, and clearly there's some big challenges we're facing. But as you saw just last week, Congress went back in to replenish the Paycheck Protection Program, something that's been vital for small businesses all throughout the country, as well as put some additional money into supporting our hospitals, our frontline workers, the doctors and nurses who are doing such heroic work in such a difficult time, to make sure that they've got the tools they need, and also to make sure that testing is more widely available. We're seeing a lot of expedited testing, new test kits. You've seen the FDA move at record speed for some of these federal agencies. Just getting red tape out of the way has been such a big challenge that Fred's been so helpful with. And, when you look at whether it's Fred's district in Pennsylvania, my district, I cover some of the city of New Orleans and the southeastern part of Louisiana. We have a lot of similar challenges. I've got a very big energy industry presence in my district. Southeast Louisiana is home to, in my district, to Port Fourchon, which is the hub of deep water drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, which supplies so much of our country's energy. And then, of course, in Fred's district, you've got probably the biggest portion of the shale plays that supply so much natural gas to our country and allow us to be energy independent. Well, we are seeing just a severe, damaging presence right now in the energy industry. And Fred is a member of the House Energy Action Team. This is something I put together as the Republican whip. We put together a group of members from all around the country, members of Congress, who really understand different components of the energy industry to address. In normal times, we address a lot of different challenges facing the energy industry. Of course, today, because of the global pandemic, energy was already seeing some problems. But then you saw a huge drop in global demand. Some have estimated more than half of the world's demand for energy has dropped. And of course, that's meant some pretty devastating consequences. So Fred joined us just recently when you saw Saudi Arabia and Russia teaming up to just dump oil on the markets and truly see the price implode to where a week and a half ago they were literally paying people to take oil, something I'd never seen in my lifetime. Fred joined to go and work with the Trump administration to get Saudi Arabia and Russia back to the table to re-evaluate their position, and they did that. And so that was something that the HEAT team did, and Fred helped lead that effort. So we've been working on a lot of different fronts. Right now, the real focus is on trying to get all of the different protocols in place to start safely opening up the economy again. And I've talked to everybody from health experts to heads of major industry groups who recognize that while we've started to bend the curve down, and even in New Orleans, we had a big breakout and so many deaths in New Orleans, over 1,500, but now we're starting to see that come down. People want to figure out if they can start getting back to work, getting back to the things they did before in a safer way. Yeah, there is no trade-off for safety of individuals' health, but there's also an understanding we can get back out and do things with social distancing, with masks or other gear. But that's something we've got to start thinking about now. And President Trump asked me to serve on his task force to reopen the economy. So, Fred, if there are any kind of questions you want me to take with you and talking about these things that we're working on, both things that Congress has passed, like the CARES Act, which I know they can reach out to your offices, or I'll be happy to give any information on that, but also on what's ahead, what lies ahead for the country to get the economy open, what challenges we face, what health experts are saying. There's a really good study that Stanford University did over the weekend. They gave some really good studies on not only what's the negative impact of the coronavirus, but as people are staying at home, if they're not getting critical tests that they need, whether it's mammograms, colonoscopies, we're seeing suicide rates increase. And now we're starting to see some negative consequences to people staying at home and not doing the things they were otherwise doing to look out for their own personal health. And, with businesses facing bankruptcy or with individuals facing job loss, there's a lot of devastation that goes with that. And look, there are hotlines out there for people with mental illness. You probably know friends. Everybody on this call probably has friends who's lost a job, or maybe you've lost a job. Make sure people are getting all of the help that they need, both mental health and checkups and things. And I know some hospitals are starting to open up again and do elective surgeries. Telehealth has advanced dramatically. So we're working on all these different challenges. But Fred, with that, I'll be happy to stay on and answer any calls that your folks might have in Pennsylvania, whether it's about something going on in your district or in New Orleans or in Washington.
Thank you, Whip Scalise. As we continue with some opening remarks, please remember to press *3 in order to enter the question queue. And again, I'd like to begin by addressing the state of our economy. It's necessary that we reopen our economy quickly and safely. These two concepts are not mutually exclusive. Every day we hear from constituents, residents of Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District, who are our family, friends, and neighbors, that own small businesses, have family-sustaining jobs, and work hard only to have their lives and livelihoods put on hold by a virus we did not ask for, and have been doing our part to stop. Over the last 6 weeks, we all have been given information in depth about training, how we can be safe during a pandemic, social distancing, wearing a mask, hygienic precautions. All of these things are working to slow the spread and should continue to be exercised in reopening our economy while we also continue to flatten the curve. There isn't any reasonable person that wants to get back to work that also wants to have immediate return to massive gatherings and unsafe activities. While we will be returning to our old normal soon enough, we can start by reopening our economy safely and cautiously sooner rather than later. As we look towards and work towards that, Congress late last week, as the whip said, took steps to ensure small businesses have the funding they need through the Paycheck Protection Program and Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. These have been important and successful programs in keeping small businesses open and people hired during the pandemic. Every dollar used in these programs keeps businesses operating and people employed. And these dollars invested in these programs are dollars invested in our economic recovery. In the first round of Paycheck Protection funding, Pennsylvania had nearly 70,000 small businesses utilize the program, receiving a combined total of over $15 billion in loans. That, and this is important, can be made forgivable if used for employee salaries, business mortgage interest, rent, or business utility payments. The PPP relaunched today at 10:30 in the morning with local banks, starting getting the process of processing these loans for small businesses. Our office looks forward to continuing to work with lenders and businesses to help our district use the program to keep workers employed and businesses ready to reopen. Also, last week, Congress authorized billions of dollars for healthcare providers and testing. Increased availability of testing means more people will feel secure while we all reopen our state and our nation. Let me also reference two more programs created as part of the CARES Act that are helping Americans right now. The first is the economic impact payments. These are direct money payments to individuals and it's an important tool to help put money in the pockets of Americans, all of whom have been impacted by COVID-19. The Internal Revenue Service recently opened their online portal to track payments, update bank information, and answer questions about the checks. We realize some Americans have yet to receive their payment or have not yet been told whether they qualify. This can be challenging given the circumstances, but we ask everybody to please be patient. The IRS is constantly updating their data, and if you qualify, you will receive your payment. Also, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Portal is now open on the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry's website. As part of the CARES Act, Congress authorized gig workers and self-employed individuals who are now unemployed as a result of COVID-19 to apply for unemployment compensation benefits when they would not normally be allowed to do so. With this portal now open, those gig workers and self-employed individuals needing unemployment compensation can apply for it. You can find out more about how to access these benefits at the website keller.house.gov/coronavirus. This website contains links to the agencies that will be providing guidance and administering these programs. We ask that you do not become frustrated and be aware that we are here to help. Please also note that these programs are massive, never-before-seen undertakings by the federal and state governments. President Trump, the whip, the leadership team in the House, and I all want to make government more effective and efficient. And for the first time, maybe ever, the federal government is working through swift timelines to deliver needed assistance. While there have been some hiccups, this massive and swift undertaking has shown that the federal government can be responsive to the people for which they work. Please be patient and know that help and the answers to your questions are on the way. Let me also update you on the work our office has been doing to stop inmate movement in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Our office has been a lead voice to stop the movement of inmates during the COVID-19 national emergency. The Federal Bureau of Prisons has more COVID-19 cases than 4 states, with more deaths than any of those states. It is unsafe during this time to be moving inmates from one facility to another, many times across state lines, from hot spots to areas like central Pennsylvania, where we have few cases. The bill we sponsored to halt inmate movement, the Pandemic Act, continues to gain bipartisan co-sponsors. In addition, our work stopped the movement of inmates into Lewisburg and FCC Allenwood, and we had been successful on that. But unfortunately, 2 weeks ago, a tornado hit FCI Estill in South Carolina, and that required 958 inmates from that facility to be moved to Lewisburg. This decision was made with little notice and no input from my office or the people of Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District. This movement was a result of the Bureau of Prisons having no better options as a result of the agency's poor planning and lack of proactive steps to address COVID-19. I remain opposed to all inmate movement during our battle with COVID-19. Due to this and many concerns with the Bureau of Prisons, our plans are to introduce legislation to bring more accountability to oversight to the Bureau of Prisons by making the BOP director position Senate confirmable. BOP needs to be responsive to the legislative branch and the people's representatives in Congress. We will continue to work to make sure that happens. And in concluding the opening remarks as a part of this phone call, I would like to thank you for your diligence in continuing to work to flatten the curve and defeat the invisible enemy, COVID-19. We have achieved great results together, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. Soon enough, maybe not as soon as we all would like, this will be behind us. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out to any one of our offices. You can find our contact information at keller.house.gov/contact. We are here to serve the people of PA 12. We will now open for questions. Again, just as a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, please press *3 to enter the queue.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is Jason Gottesman. I'll be moderating the question and answer portion. And our first question comes from online today. That's from Kevin from State College, who notes that there's been trillions spent by the federal government over the course of the last several weeks. And he says he's concerned about our nation's debt. He asks, are you concerned about this as well, and how does this impact your thinking on future COVID legislation?
Well, again, I would like to thank you for the question. The first thing I would say about the debt, it's a concern always, as it has been when I was in Harrisburg representing the people of Pennsylvania's 85th legislative district. Again, we're at unprecedented times, and due to no fault of anybody that lives in Pennsylvania's 12th congressional district or across our nation, we've had to take extraordinary steps. Our governors have, and the federal government has been there to step in and help the people. As far as going forward, that is one thing that I've said many times, and I've heard said by some of our leadership, that before we talk about anything or any further action as far as stimulus related to COVID-19, we need to make sure what we have done has had the desired impacts to the right people, and also that we should not be rushing in to have, as Speaker Pelosi has wanted to say, far-reaching and transformative things. Anything we do needs to be narrowly focused to addressing the impacts of COVID-19. Whoops, Scalise, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. And look, Kevin's concerns are shared by myself, Fred, and a lot of my colleagues. You know, when you look at any of these bills, you have to look at the bill from a few perspectives. Now, number one, we don't get to write our own bills. We're not in the majority in the House. But you weigh a bill and you say, okay, would the country be better or worse off with this bill passing? And clearly we're in a unique time with the pandemic, with the entire economy shut down. The president has been very good about giving states guidance through the Centers for Disease Control, but letting states make their decisions. But in the end, when you see major segments of our economy shut down, you look at something like the Paycheck Protection Program and paying people to stay on their payroll. They're going to be paid one way or another by government. They're going to be paid on unemployment rolls. What we did with the Paycheck Protection Program, while yes, it definitely adds to the deficit, I wish we weren't in this situation, but what would these small businesses look like? And I've heard from so many, not just in my district in Southeast Louisiana, all across the country, of businesses that would have gone bankrupt if they didn't get this lifeline, this relief. And so they didn't do anything wrong. I voted against, by the way. Fred wasn't there, fortunately, but I had just gotten to Congress when you had the big bank collapse in 2008, and I voted against the bank bailout because those were big banks on Wall Street that took major risk, and they failed through their own dereliction. And so I voted against the federal government coming in and bailing them out. In this case, these businesses didn't do anything wrong, but all of a sudden they literally are facing a financial collapse. And we don't want an economy where when we do come back, hopefully it's in a few weeks, where we come back safer. Do you really want only half of the businesses in this country coming back? And what would happen to our banks if half of those businesses collapsed and folded and went into bankruptcy? And all those people, imagine right now we're facing about 30 million people unemployed. Imagine if it was permanent unemployment where those jobs didn't happen. So the damage to our economy would be worse if we voted no on that and the bill failed. Now, I am strongly opposed to bailing out states that were failing before this. You know, you're hearing a big debate, and it's starting in states like New York, which, keep in mind, New York had a multi-billion-dollar deficit prior to COVID-19. And so for them to suggest that we in Washington should just send unlimited pots of money to these states that were failing because they have high taxes and are running their people out of the state, that's something that I don't support, because I think it would be encouraging bad behavior. We're helping people who need help, and states did get money from this too. But there is, like Fred said, there are trillions of dollars that have now been passed by Congress. Instead of states thinking, you know, what is the next big pot of money to get, they should all be working with us to make sure the money we spent is spent properly, and it helps those small businesses hold on so that families can be kept intact, they don't lose their houses, and small business owners don't lose their businesses, so we can have an economy to come back to, hopefully in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Whip.
All right, we're going to take a question over the phone from Eric, who has a question about dairy. Eric, go ahead. You're on the line.
Thank you very much. As you might appreciate, the fact that agriculture has been challenged over a number of years, dairy is specific, is seeing an unprecedented period in our production side. As a dairy farmer in the last 25 years, a county commissioner, this is the toughest period of time I can remember. And the sooner we are able to put finances directly into the producer's hands, we might be able to salvage a lot of the challenged farmers and operations that's so desperately needed in our economy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate you calling into the meeting tonight. I would say there's several things. I know we've been working on things on the demand side of dairy before the pandemic. Some legislation that Congressman Thompson has been on the lead on, Congressman Joyce, and when I got to D.C., got on those right away too, to create that demand for dairy in our school lunch programs, making sure that milk is labeled properly. A couple other things that have happened through the CARES Act, and I think it's a note that there's $19 billion that Secretary Perdue a little over a week ago mentioned, and it was during the White House briefing, that they would be putting that money and making that money available to our farmers, in some programs where the money would go to the farmers to buy production to help with the food supply chain, and money going to the farmers. The other thing I would like to point out is the economic injury disaster loans. While farms could apply for the paycheck protection, it wasn't clear about the economic loans from the SBA, and farmers were made eligible for that in those. Some of those are grants too, which I think is important to note, being what's happened with agriculture, that assistance would be there. So there are some things going. I know, Eric, we've worked on some things before. I really look forward to being able to continue to take your advice and work on things to help our farmers, because you're still going to work during this pandemic, and we appreciate that very much. And Whip, I don't know if you'd have anything else to lead coming up on that.
Yeah, Eric, Fred has shared with me some of the concerns about the ag industry, specifically with dairy. Throughout this, we've seen it was heartbreaking when you see dairy farmers literally having to just pour milk onto the ground because there's no market for it. And in fact, you've got G.T. Thompson on the ag committee, who's a senior member over there, who's been trying to help implement some of those concerns that Fred has brought to the forefront. So we're going to keep working on that. And again, the big answer is getting the economy back open and increasing global demand, and just in America, getting our restaurants opened again, even if it's in a limited capacity initially, where you're taking people's temperature beforehand and the servers are wearing masks. Those are all things that are being talked about from the national restaurant perspective, but all of that will help increase the demand for dairy. But in the meantime, getting that immediate financial help is something that Fred worked on in this last rendition of the CARES Act and PPP.
Thank you.
All right, our next question comes from Julia online, who wants to know why it's important to hold the World Health Organization and China accountable for their role in exacerbating COVID-19.
Well, I think it's important because, it's our job as elected officials to our constituents and the American people. We defend our Constitution, we stand up, and public safety is a responsibility of the government. And, the World Health Organization was really just taking information from China and repeating it and not getting down to the bottom of this. And it's been reported, and we've seen different facts that show that if China had handled this appropriately back at the end of last year, that people would not have been infected so badly all around the world, and we wouldn't be seeing this. So I say that, and then I say that the fact that the World Health Organization didn't do what it should have done, and in fact was repeating China's, it's not spread by humans, that whole kind of thing, into January. We put a lot of money into the World Health Organization, and it's your dollars. And when you're not responsible with dollars, and I'm on the oversight committee, and when you're not responsible with the taxpayer dollars, I think that's some oversight. I think the United States government has every right to hold people accountable when they took steps. And I applaud the administration. I mean, the president shutting down traveling from Wuhan, China, from China to the United States, when they were allowing people to travel around the world, but not within their own country. So definitely they knew something. The World Health Organization knew about it. And before the World Health Organization even had a name for this virus, the president had already established a task force, had shut down travel from foreign countries, had put people in earlier to take screenings from people at customs. So the president had taken a lot of steps prior to that, even the World Health Organization even giving the virus a name in February. So I think had the World Health Organization been more upfront, had China been more upfront, and it would have saved lives, and we would not be experiencing the problems we're having with our economy. So I don't know if I left anything out in that, but that's really how I see it. Whip, if you'd have anything additional to add, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, Fred, and Julia's spot on. I mean, look, what Fred just said about the World Health Organization, their Director General, Tedros, has been an embarrassment, and for a long time, too, by the way, before this latest outbreak. Even if you go back to other outbreaks that China's directly responsible for, you know, you think about SARS, they missed the ball completely on that. And I don't even necessarily say they missed the ball. They were covering for the Chinese communist government, which is disgraceful. And when the president cut off or said he's going to work to cut off their funding, I think we all should be supporting that. And I mean, I've called for the head of the WHO to step down. I mean, they've taken away any credibility. You need a respected entity to speak out on global pandemics. We've got a great group at CDC. They're very well respected. Dr. Fauci's organization is very respected globally. They offered, I was in a meeting in the White House months ago where they offered to send people in, our best doctors, into China where their medical experts were pleading to come in, and the Chinese government blocked us from going in to find out what was going on. That cost lives in America. It cost the world lives. And instead of standing up against that, the World Health Organization head is criticizing our president who took those precautions Fred mentioned. And keep in mind, you know, where China started this in these wet markets, which the whole world should be against what was going on there, where they had bats and other these animals with massive diseases that should not be coming into contact with humans, and they go and they slaughter them, and then they eat them without even cooking them properly, and it spreads diseases like what we've seen with SARS and now COVID-19. They just opened up these wet markets again. Where is the WHO outrage against that? We should all be standing up globally to block those things from happening. So anyway, we've got to be vocal against WHO. We ought to cut off their funding and insist that Tedros be forced out as the head. He's literally a mouthpiece for China and has covered up so much of this pandemic that could have been stopped.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Sharon, who wants to know about supply chain issues coming from other countries with our medicine and medical supplies. Sharon, go ahead. You should be on the line.
Okay. Thank you both for everything you've been doing. And I'm wondering what plans, if any, you have to bring the manufacturing of medical supplies and medicine back to the United States so we're not reliant should another epidemic like this happen.
Yeah, Fred, I'll jump in here. You want to take it, Fred? This because this is a major problem that we've been talking about in Congress recently. Yeah, you'll think about this, Sharon. Okay, thanks, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Fred. But Chinese pharmaceutical companies supplied more than 90% of most of the antibiotics. I mean, the generic drugs alone, most of them, most of the critical components are made in China. We have got to get our supply chain back. This is something President Trump had been talking about before this pandemic broke out, just the need to bring more manufacturing back into the United States. But I think now if you look at two critical elements in this fight against coronavirus, both PPE for our hospital workers and so many of the drugs and rare earth materials we need are made in China. And China shut down a 3M plant. 3M was making all these N95 masks and other PPE equipment, and they wouldn't let an American company, 3M, distribute those products that we wanted to buy that were made in China back to America. The Chinese government literally shut that down. If this isn't a wake-up call about the concerns of the Chinese control of our supply chain on so many critical elements of our livelihood, we need to bring that back. We need to recreate that in America and we need to do it now. This has shown and exposed that.
Thank you, Scalise. And you know, you said that so well. The thing I would say too, I think, is some of the things the president realized before about bringing things back to America and incentivizing American companies to reshore their production, but particularly to you know, when you're talking pharmaceuticals and protective equipment. And being on the oversight committee, we're looking into that. There's a lot of members that are concerned and want to know the oversight on how this happened and how we get more things brought back to the United States. In fact, we just had a call earlier today with our entire conference regarding supply chain from China and all the pharmaceuticals. And, you know, things like aspirin, blood pressure medicine. You know, it's not just a matter of things to fight COVID-19, but just antibiotics and other pharmaceuticals in general. And maybe China doesn't necessarily produce the whole medicine, but the derivatives, you know, the things that are put into the medicine actually come from China. So very good question, very good concern, and that's a concern of many of us in Congress, that we're working to make sure that we can get that stuff back. Because, you know, everybody talks about free trade, but there's no free trade with China, because the Chinese government has a monopoly on like 25 different areas of their economy. And that's not free trade when you can't compete with that kind of stuff. They're about control, and we need to make sure that we bring the things back here into America that keep us safe. So thanks for the question.
Okay, our next question comes from Stephen Ray, who wants to know about eligibility for stimulus checks in relation to Social Security. Stephen, go ahead. You're on the line.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if when we're on Social Security, if we still get the stimulus check.
Yeah. The stimulus checks, and it's a $1,200 payment to every individual. And now the only thing I would say is if your income is greater than $75,000 per individual, it starts to get reduced, or $150,000 for couples. But yeah, people on Social Security, people that might be on disability payments, people that work, people that might be on unemployment, are all eligible for the thing, so long as they meet the income guidelines. And of course, our U.S. citizens would be eligible for those payments. If you'd happen to have any of those questions on that, there's irs.gov. If you go to their website, and you might be able, if you haven't had to file income tax for the past couple of years, you could go on there because of earnings. Some people don't have to because of earnings. If they don't earn a certain amount, they don't have to file. But you could go on there and you could look at that guidance. If you have any trouble at all or questions navigating those websites, keller.house.gov/contact, contact one of our offices, and we'd be glad to give you the help you need to get your answers. So, thanks.
All right, our next question comes from online, and it's from Melanie, and she wants to know if there are any efforts to increase food assistance in rural areas and food delivery through SNAP programs.
Hi, Melanie. Yeah, this is Fred again. I would like to say yes, there's been a lot of money that has been put into the nutrition programs, even for schools, because schools are still, or areas are still providing meals for students during the week. Additionally to that, we've increased the assistance for SNAP and opened up the eligibility so people would be able to have those items happen. The food purchase program through USDA, purchasing more things for food banks to help distribution there. In addition to that, I know there's a lot of private organizations right in Susquehanna County. Capital Oil and Gas has been helping, donating, and working at the food bank in Susquehanna County. So a lot of things have been done because we know that during this time, there may be kids or people that go out to other events sponsored in the community that get meals, and it's very important that we provide a variety of methods for people to receive that. And that's quite frankly, some of the things that we've done too, making sure that some of the unemployment compensation benefits have been increased in some ways to make sure people have the resources to purchase food and needed items.
Okay, we'll be taking our next call from the telephone lines, and our question is from Harold, who has a question about returning to religious services as soon as possible. Harold, you're on the line. Go ahead with your question.
Well, I appreciate it, sir. Question, I guess, I don't know if this is really the forum for this, but everything's a little vague as far as us returning to having services together where we can gather together. And I'm just wondering if you're aware of any timeline or anything that would keep us from starting to get together again with precautions. And I guess that's my question. It's not something that's really being addressed, really. We're just kind of left hanging.
Yeah. Well, Harold, I will say religious liberty, foundation of our society, is so important to me and many people. Our church has actually gone to online. Our pastor goes in and actually live streams a sermon, and it's really helpful. But that need to be able to worship as we freely. We need to get back to. I'm convinced that we can do it safely. We can follow the CDC guidelines. And I know that in many states, state and region to region, things may be much different in Philadelphia because of the dense population than it is in rural parts of Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania's 12th congressional district. So again, I think the guidance that's put out from the Wolf administration in Pennsylvania needs to be clear, and we need to make sure that we respect everyone's religious liberties, and I will always advocate for that. I know that Pennsylvanians are resourceful, Americans are resourceful, and we'll figure out how to do it safely so that our neighbors, families, and friends stay safe.
Yeah, Fred, if I could jump in on this too, because
yes, absolutely.
I so strongly believe in people being able to express their religious faith, and you've helped us fight for the religious freedoms that had been taken away to restore so many of those. President Trump has been a tremendous advocate for religious freedom, and you've seen pastors getting creative, and like you said, Fred, where your pastor does online services. In New Orleans, there were a lot of churches that were doing drive-in, harken back to the old drive-in movie theaters, where people would go to the parking lot of the church on Easter Sunday, and they'd sit in the car with their family, and then the pastor was outside kind of in front of everybody giving the service over the radio, and it was just a neat thing to see. But we all want to get back to our actual place of worship, and the sooner the better. I know Fred's been an advocate of trying to see if Pennsylvania's governor would work with the General Assembly more, and I wouldn't want to see the governor of New York having to have more of a say in when Pennsylvanians can go assemble than people in Pennsylvania. But let the state kind of work through that and then come up with the smartest way for people to come back. Just like in a restaurant, in the next few weeks, hopefully, you're going to be able to go physically walk into most restaurants around America, and you might not be able to sit right next to someone else. You probably won't want to initially, but maybe every other table will be available. And the server might be wearing a mask, and they might check your temperature. And they'll tell anybody over 100-degree temperature to stay home. If you have a fever, you shouldn't be out anyway. And so once you take more precautions like that, people are going to want to get out and be around their neighbors and not just doing it over the internet. And so hopefully that comes in the next few weeks with governors working with their local state leaders. And each state's going to be unique, but let that be done in the smartest way as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from online, and it's from Anastasia, who wants to know about if there have been any small businesses in PA-12 that have received PPP money, and a little bit more about that.
If I can, I'll take this first and then pass it over to the whip, because I know the whip's been actually gathering success stories from all across the nation and putting that out, making sure that it's how it's done and how it's benefiting our communities is really great. We have a business right here in Lycoming County that needed some help with the PPP on the first round. And the gentleman went into the local bank. And here's the important part of this. Everybody talks about big businesses and big banks. Keep in mind that 75% of the loans were for $150,000 and less. There's been over 5,000 lenders nationwide that have participated. I mean, it's really a great program that's been effective. rather than trying to go to the Small Business Administration and have them go through a mountain of paperwork, we said, hey, look, you're a small business, you have a relationship with a local credit union or bank or lending facility, we'll set it up so that they can be helpful. But the business here in Lycoming County, one gentleman needed $12,000. I mean, it's a very small business, one employee, and he needs $12,000 for over 2 months for employee expenses, for mortgage, and for utilities. Applied on a Friday, and by the following Tuesday had the money in his bank account because he went through the local bank right here in Lycoming County. So it's been a hugely successful program, and the importance of it is it keeps people attached to their employer rather than having to go through the bureaucracy of filing for unemployment and all those things, so that when that business is ready to get back to work, the employees can get back to work more quickly. The attachment to the workforce, and I think it's just really been a great program. Have there been a couple of hiccups in the beginning when it was rolled out? Yeah, there were, but I tell you what, in a week's time, Treasury and the SBA have been able to put out the guidance on that for the first round, and it's benefited many, many small businesses, their employees, and their families. So, Whip, if you'd like to add anything to that, I'd appreciate your input.
Yeah, and Fred, this has been one of the great success stories when you talk about Republicans and Democrats working together on something that truly made an impact on people's lives. They're clearly examples of the partisan fights, but this one was just less than 2 months ago. Republicans and Democrats came together to create this program to save small businesses and the millions of people who work for those small businesses. And so in the first 2 weeks of the program, 1.5 million small businesses across the country got loans. Like Fred said, the average loan was fairly small for what you might have expected, and 60% of the loans went through small local banks, not the big banks. Big banks gave out those loans too, but it was our local community banks. And what we did when we were putting this together, we knew that the Small Business Administration would be overwhelmed. Even in a disaster, when SBA comes into a local community, things get slow. It's red tape at its worst sometimes. And so we knew if we got our local community banks involved, it would help this work much smoother. And boy, did it really work well. I want to applaud our local community banks because they stepped up. You had people coming into the banks, even with coronavirus all around, people were showing up at the bank, accepting applications, setting up online portals, and you saw those loans go out. I was just at the bill signing Friday of the renewed PPP, where we replenished the program with over $300 billion additional dollars to help more small businesses. And the secretary of the SBA, the administrator of the SBA at the bill signing said they processed more small business loans through our local banks for this PPP program, more in 14 days than the SBA has closed loans in 14 years. That's how amazing it's been. And I've heard from so many businesses, like Fred said, we kept a portal and we started accumulating stories of businesses all across the country. And I mean, it's you hear good stories and bad stories, but to hear the good stories of all these small family-owned businesses who love their workers and were able to keep their workers on the payroll, didn't have to lay them off because they got the PPP loan. For those businesses that haven't gotten them yet, there is more money now in there, and hopefully it lasts a few more weeks and can hold a lot more small businesses together until they can start opening again.
Thanks, Flip Scalise. The one thing I'd like to mention, too, is a lot of times these loans become grants. So the business doesn't have to pay it back when they use it for payroll. They use it for mortgage interest or rent or utility payments. I think that's an important thing to our small businesses. So.
Okay, great. Our next question will come from our telephone lines, and it comes from Corrine, who had success getting a PPP loan, but wants to know about the EIDL loan program and when that might be restarted. Corrine, go ahead. You should be on the line.
Hi, thank you. I have two items. Firstly, as my husband and I are small business owners and a recipient of a PPP loan, I wanted to thank you for your efforts. Without the PPP loan, we probably would be on the verge of filing for bankruptcy. So I say thank you for the lifeline. Secondly, with so much going on with all of that, we waited too long to make application for an EIDL loan. Do you know if the EIDL loan will be reopened?
Well, actually, part of putting money into that, replenishing some of that, was in the latest bill that we passed, the we'll call CARES 3.5. So we're hopeful. I mean, as much as the administration has done to get the economic stimulus payments to individuals and the PPP guidance out, we're very optimistic they'll have that up and running very rapidly. Whip, I don't know if you'd have any other updates on that or any additional information that I might not have covered.
Yeah, Fred and Corinne, it's great to hear your story. I appreciate you passing on what the PPP loans meant to your business, because we've heard that from so many others, and we want your business to make it through this, because if this is going to be successful when we reopen the economy, we need businesses like yours to come back, and those workers want to have jobs to come back to as well. So we put an additional $50 billion in there in this most recent bill we passed last week for the EIDL program. These are not the forgivable loans that Fred had mentioned. The PPP loan, if you spend 75% of it on your workforce and then rent and utilities, the whole loan could be forgiven. EIDL is more of your traditional disaster loan, which is also important. It's very low interest right now. As you know, low interest rates have never been lower. And so it's a low interest bridge for businesses to get through this time as well. And we did put additional money in that program because the first round of funding did run out for that as well. So you will see that. It just got signed into law Friday, Korean, so you might want to go check back with your local banker now. That money should be available. Hopefully that lasts, a few more weeks again.
All right, our next call will come from Donna, who wants to know what has been learned at the state and federal levels from this pandemic. Donna, go ahead. You should be live on the line.
Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen, for doing this call this evening. This has been, as we know, a very difficult and unprecedented time in our country. And an earlier question talked about shoring up our supply chain. There are reports that this could come in several waves. What have we learned at the state and federal level about how to communicate, what information to disseminate, and what we can do to keep our hospitals, our healthcare systems, our local systems in the ready for another pandemic should it occur?
With Scalise, I know you may have some insight on this, and then if you don't mind, from a national perspective, talking a little bit about that, and then I can talk about what's happened here specifically between the federal government and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, sure, Donna. One of the things that we know is that we've got to make improvements on the national stockpile. And this gets back to the supply chain issue first, that we've got to make more PPE and other things in the United States. I've seen people at the state and local level stepping up. I'll give you a good example. I went to LSU, and don't go after me if y'all are Penn State folks or something, but we just came off a great football season. But our basketball arena, where when I was a student, Shaquille O'Neal played in what's called the Pete Maravich Assembly Center, they've converted that facility into the engineering department worked with some other agencies to set up a manufacturing facility where they're making PPE in the Pete Maravich Assembly Center, which used to be our basketball arena, which will again be our basketball arena. But right now they're literally making PPE. They're using the Genetians, the theater department's sewing machines to sew gowns and masks for nurses and doctors. And one of the things, again, I talked about the national stockpile. Clearly they didn't have enough for a pandemic. And this was something over years and years where what they found is some of it was outdated. And so we're talking about a lot of different ways as we bring the supply chain back to also improve the national stockpile so that hospitals can much quicker get the things that they need to protect the doctors and nurses, from ventilators to PPE, the masks that were in short supply as well. So there are a lot of lessons learned that we can always improve upon in any disaster. That's surely one of them.
Thank you, Whip Scalise. And again, Pennsylvania, I think the federal government and the state governments have learned very well how to work together and I'll say in Pennsylvania, between PEMA and FEMA. And it's really been, as far as getting things to our healthcare providers. I would like to say we are running up on our 6:15 time frame, and I want to make sure that we don't get cut off too soon. Whip, if you'd have a couple remarks, and then I'll just close the call.
All right. Well, thanks, Fred. And I'll just leave on this. I mean, look, I was a state representative when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and I represented some of those areas. My father literally lost everything he had. His house was 5 feet underwater for 3 weeks. And you saw people just pull together, communities, neighborhoods pull together. Everybody just kind of muscled through it, and it was a tough time. And this is a tough time, and it's a different kind of difficulty. But at the same time, we know we're going to get through it. We've got to be smarter about how we get out of our houses. But I've seen so many people that say, look, I just want to get back out, and I'm going to wear a mask, or I'm going to wash my hands more, and I'm going to be careful about what I do. But I want to just start getting back to the things that we do as Americans. And I know when these orders by each state start happening in these next few weeks, you're going to see more and more people ready to get back out to the different things that they used to do with their families, and be safe about it. But I know we're going to recover and rebuild what was a great economy before all of this. It's going to be a great economy again, and I appreciate that y'all have sent Fred Keller up to work with us. He's been a great partner in this effort to get some things done that actually are helping people right now, and that's what we just need to do. We need to get through it together and pull together while we're doing it. Fred, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Whip Scalise. It's really been an honor to have you join us this evening. And again, we want to thank you for your leadership and service to our nation. The people of Pennsylvania are grateful that you're in Washington fighting for all of us. And everyone, I want to thank you for your participation. You're outstanding. You work hard each and every day. And if you didn't get to ask your question or need additional follow-up, please feel free to contact us by visiting keller.house.gov. And while I'd like to encourage you to visit this page for information about coronavirus, I want to thank you again. Best wishes. We know we're going to get through this because we're Americans, and there's nobody more prepared or willing to help their family, friends, nation, and community. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and wish you all and your families the very best. Thank you.